Hello, my name is Giacomo Garaccione and I'm making this video to present and introduce you the BIPMIN experiment that you are about to perform. Before I begin, I'd like to thank you for your participation and I will now start. The BIPMIN experiment consists of solving two BPMN exercises of similar difficulty with different evaluation systems. One exercise will be evaluated with a syntax check, similar to the one that is used by the Signavio tool, which we have used during the laboratories, while another exercise will also be evaluated not only with the syntax check, but also with a correctness check related to the case study in use. This correctness check makes use of gamification mechanics in terms of scores, penalties, feedback, and so on, which will be shown to you during this video presentation. Two exercises are the same, but since you have been divided into groups, you may have them to do them in different order and evaluated in a different way. I will proceed to explain how it works. In any case, please try to solve these exercises alone, regardless of how they are presented to you, in which order and in which evaluation order. The schedule of this experiment is as follows. Right now, you're watching the introduction, and this will take about 30 minutes, more or less. And then after this, there will be the first exercise. This exercise will take 45 minutes, and depending on the group you have been placed in, there will be a different way of handling this exercise. Group A, for example, will have exercise A evaluated without the gamified system, so just the syntax check, while Group B will have the same exercise but evaluated with also the gamified check. At the same time, Group C will have the exercise B without the gamified check, and Group D will have the gamified check and exercise B. After 45 minutes, there will be the second exercise, which will be depending again on your group, the opposite exercise with the opposite evaluation method. That means that Group A again will have exercise B with the gamified evaluation, Group B also exercise B without gamified evaluation, and so on for Group C and Group D, which will also have the opposite exercise and the opposite evaluation method. 45 minutes after starting the second exercise, there you will also complete this new exercise and go for the ending session, where you will be asked to fill a questionnaire which will be about the experience, how you felt about the mechanics, and what was your impression on how the experience was performed. The way the syntax check works is explained as follows. The check is based on an external library, which is bpmnlinter.js, and this check evaluates whether the diagram you submit respects the standard rules of BPMN modeling, that is, having the correct amount of flows, for example, incoming or outcoming of an element, and all the other rules you have seen during the course. An exercise that is evaluated with just the syntax check, that is, with no gamified mechanics, is considered complete if the solution submitted has no errors. Keep in mind, however, that there will be also a manual check of the solution based on how well it models the system, not made by the system, but made by us. So you should not submit an almost empty solution that is syntactically correct, because this will be considered an error by the human evaluators. Remember to model correctly the part of the problem, even if the system tells you that the syntax is correct. After you check for the first time the correctness of the syntax errors will be highlighted on the diagram, so you will be able to know what you have done wrong and will be able to correct what you are doing. One of these rules, which is very important to mention, is that all the elements of the diagram need to have a label, a name. So even if you may not be used to giving names to elements such as, for example, start events or gateways, or gateways that are used to collect sequence flows, remember that all the elements in your diagram need to have a name. So remember to name correctly pools, layings, start events, end events. All the tasks should be named correctly. All the elements that appear in your diagram need to have a name in order to have your solution correctly evaluated in terms of syntax. Please remember to give names to all the elements. In terms of gamified elements made by the gamified version, there is a different check made based on how well the solution is coherent with the problem modeled by the text. You will receive feedback after checking the correctness on which parts of the problem you have modeled correctly and which ones you have made errors on. Every exercise that is evaluated with gamification with this mechanic has a starting grade, which will be reduced by a penalty for each part of the problem you do not model correctly when you try to check the correctness of your problem. But in the same way, if you model correctly some parts of the problem, you will receive the corresponding points for that part of the problem, and these points can be stored and used on the tool page, exercise page, to purchase pieces of a simple puzzle as a reward. You will also be able to see after if each correctness check how well in terms of percentage your solution was made. So in terms of how correct on a range on 0 to 100 your solution was. The correctness check, which is the key part of the gamified version, the gamified evaluation system, uh, checks if the parts of your diagram, that the elements that are part of your diagrams respect the specified properties. Properties can be parts of this subgroup, which may be having an element of a specific type. So you may model you will have to model, for example, part of a problem with a service task and not just a normal task. The element name, an element needs to have a name that is coherent with the text. An element needs also to belong to the adequate pool, so you cannot have elements belonging to no pool or to the wrong pool. Elements may be connected in terms of incoming and outgoing sequence flow to other specific elements. For example, you may need to model a task that is sending a sequence flow to another task, and this first task is also receiving a sequence flow from a start event. And also all these events need to have a current name. So not only the task needs to have the correct name, but also the start event that sends the flow to this task needs to have a correct name, and the task that receives a flow from the first task needs to have a correct name. This specification is also can also be made for message flows. In a similar way, you may need to specify that an element in a pool may send or receive messages from another element of a different pool. And again, the correct way, the flow needs to be correct, and these elements also need to have a correct name. Speaking of event elements, these also need to have the specific type. So if you have an intermediate catch event, this event may need to be a timer event if adequate with the text, or a timer event if adequate with the text. What you're seeing now is the homepage you will see after logging in on the softtank.polito.it/bipmin page, which is the page where you will perform the experiment. Keep in mind that even if you do the login with the credentials that have been sent to you with an email, and also you will see in the Google form, you should just do the login and wait in this page here without doing anything until the end of the video presentation. So since we keep track of when exercises are started, you will need to wait until you are able to actually start the exercise. Then when you are able to start the exercise, you should click on exercise 1, and you will be sent to this page, which will display on the left side the text of the exercise, an entire description, and on the middle of the page you have the BPMN canvas. Here you can drag and drop elements to make your attempt your solution, and by clicking on an element, for example, you can give it a name, and you can drag flow from an element to another. Here you can create a new element, and also we can see task 1, for example, task 2, you can give it a name, and then you can see from here you have made a very basic diagram. Now, what you are seeing here is just the description, meaning that if you see just the description tab here and no other things here, you are in the non-gamified version. Here you can just make a simple syntax check of your solution by clicking on the check syntax button. We can see a problem, for example, because we did not give a name to our pool. So now, by giving the name pool to our pool, we can see that our diagram is syntactically correct. Keep in mind, however, that this was just an example. You cannot submit this solution because it is not acceptable, even if it is correct in terms of syntax. Only when you have spent 45 minutes and it is time to submit, or you have finished, you think your solution is correct, you can click on the return home button, and you will submit your final solution and be sent back to the previous screen. Keep in mind that doing this is considered as your final submission. We will not consider new solution on the same exercise if you return to this exercise and do it again as other solution. Doing this will send you back to the home screen and save your final attempt. As an example, we can see that we return home here, and if we click back on exercise 1, we have again an empty canvas. The same thing will happen if we click on BIPMIN here. So if you do this before the time is up and you need to change exercise, you will lose all your progress, all your diagram will be deleted, and you will have to start from the beginning. So do not go home with either one of these options until you feel it is right. And also keep in mind that returning home is the way you submit your final attempt. Your final solution is submitted with just return home, and this is final. Do not attempt to submit more with after submitting with the return home, and keep in mind that if you return home with the BIPMIN link, you will lose your progress and your attempt will not be saved. As a way to see how the tool works, we can see that other than just giving a name and sending appending new elements, we can also change the type of our elements. For example, I can make this task a send task or a service task. I can make this pool an empty pool. And moreover, this also works for elements, for events, of course, a timer or a message. This is the way you change the type of your elements, and you will be asked to do so during the exercises if it is coherent, if it makes sense in relation to the solution. Some more additional details on how the BPMN canvas here works is that while you can do keyboard shortcuts such as Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V to copy an element and Ctrl+Z to undo your previous operation, this does not work in the same way for the right mouse click. So if you want to copy elements, your only way is to use keyboard shortcuts. You can also select multiple elements by clicking on Alt, and then you can also copy, drag and drop whatever you have copied. But again, and also cancel with the cancel button. But again, this is the only way you can do these kinds of shortcuts. Do not use right click because the BPMN canvas does not support right clicking. As a new text here, we check syntax again, and we can see there are many errors because there are no names for our elements. So this is so that you keep in mind that you need to name all the elements in your diagram before, so that your solution is considered correct. Then let's assume that we have spent 45 minutes, and then it is time to go to exercise 2. As we can see, there are two new more tabs here, the score tabs and the rules tabs. The rules tab will show us, will show the list of rules that have been correctly defined. That is the element, the amount of parts of the problem that have been modeled correctly and then have been awarded points. And here, this in the scores section, we can see which the various scores. We have an empty progress bar for right now with the correctness of the previous solution attempted, which is obviously empty because we did not attempt a solution yet. We see our current grade, which will not increase but will only decrease based on how many errors we make and the penalties that are deducted from our solution. And the points are 0 right now, but if we model correctly parts of the problem, we earn points, and these points can be spent to purchase pieces of the hidden puzzle. Right now this number will increase, we will see more and more pieces of the puzzle, and until, if we model correctly the entire problem, we earn the maximum amount of points and we are able to correctly purchase every part of the puzzle. If we make, for example, a small here, let's do a simple try. Elections here, mouse. Elections here, we can see that our diagram is correct in terms of syntax, and we have this button here that allows us to check the correctness. Here we will see that there have been many errors because obviously the diagram is empty, but we see that we have modeled the following parts of the problem: election start and election definition. So here we can see these rules appear right now on the left side of the screen, and we can see that the start event, for example, has been colored with the same color of the election start rule. The same goes for the election definition. This is the feedback mechanism. You have seen the parts of the problem that have not been modeled correctly, but you can also see the parts of the problem that have been modeled correctly. And the corresponding color shows which part corresponds to which element or group of elements. And also, as we can see, the correctness of the previous solution has increased, but our grade has been reduced and we have earned a point. We can now buy the first piece of the puzzle. If we decide that our solution is final, we again click on return home, and if we return to the exercise, again there is no exercise, but the rules remain unlocked. So this is so that if you by mistake return home, you may remember which part of the problem you have modeled correctly. But again, keep in mind that you should return home only with the return home button, and this should be final for each exercise. Be very careful because, again, I will repeat another time so that you keep it in mind. Returning home in any way will cause you to lose your progress. So return home only with the return home button and only when you are sure that your solution is final. Any other situation where you return home will lead to a loss of progress. Keep it in mind. It was already mentioned before during the various presentation of the experience, but I will repeat it just in case. If you participate, by participating to this experiment, you will reward it to 2 bonus points to be summed to the grade of the written exam. But these bonus points, there are some limitations. Again, we can only give you the bonus points only if your grade on the written exam is higher than 18, and the sum of the 2 points and the grade of the written exam will never be higher than 27. You can see some examples here. If you have 26, you go to 27. If you have 27, you go to 27. If you have 16, you remain on 16 because it is below 18, which is the minimum amount of grade to pass. And again, these 2 points will only be awarded to those that perform the course project. Other than these specifications, other specifications in terms of how we award the points are based on the quality of the solutions you make. We will not only assign the points to the solutions that are perfect, that have no mistakes, that do everything correctly with no issues, but the solutions you submit, they must not be empty, they must not have evident conceptual errors or syntax errors, they must be at least a bit, a reasonable amount of way coherent with the text and the problem. If you submit solutions that are syntactically correct but have no relation to the problem, you will not earn the points. And moreover, another important detail is that you need to respect the way things are handled, the sequence of actions. You need to do exercise 1 by clicking on exercise 1 only when you are told to start this exercise, and only after 45 minutes of this exercise you will be allowed to start exercise 2 again for 45 minutes. If you submit solutions for exercise 1, then go do exercise 2 before the time is right, or you do after you have done exercise 2, you return again and try to do exercise 1, if you change the order in any way, you will not be awarded the points, because these exercises are meant to be experienced in order, and the way the different exercises are graded and evaluated need to be experienced in the correct order, with no way to mix the two exercises. You should do as you are said. Do exercise 1 and then exercise 2. Some important notes again to keep in mind while you perform the exercise. These have been stressed multiple times, but I feel the need to remind them again because they are important to perform well in this experiment. Remember to give a name to each element in your diagram. Every single element you put in your diagram needs to have a name. You will see with the syntax check that if your elements do not have a name, the solution will be wrong. But if you want to avoid this mistake, you should remember by yourself to give a name to each element. This name also should be as coherent to the text as possible. Do not give random names to your elements, but names that make sense in the context of the problem. Only model parts of the problem that are relevant to the information system under use. No physical tasks that do not involve the system. Only the tasks that make sense, that have a serious interaction between users and the system. They may be service tasks or manual tasks, but they need to make sense. And again, a definition of element is extremely important. If you define tasks as service or manual tasks when it is not needed, this will be an error. And if you want your task do not belong to these two categories, that is standard tasks, you should be modeled as regular tasks rather than user tasks. This is because of the way the system, the evaluation system interprets tasks, and you should keep this in mind. So standard tasks are basic blank tasks, service tasks need to be modeled as service tasks, manual tasks need to be modeled as manual tasks. The same also goes for events. You should model timer events as timer events when it is needed, message events when it is needed, and so on. And you should also remember to handle the correct ways to end the process, both in terms of success and failure. You should consider situations where, for example, users cannot authenticate and the process ends with failure. This should also be modeled correctly in your solution. And I will repeat it again because it is the most important part of the system, the evaluation. You should be extremely careful and never refresh the page, and only go back to the previous page only by clicking the return home button when you feel the solution is right. Or any other situation where you return home will cause you to lose your progress and you will have to start again. If you have almost finished your solution, but then for a minor distraction you return home, you will have to do the entire solution again, and this is a very big problem for you because you have lost all your work. So be very careful and pay close attention and never return home until it is time to submit your final solution. This concludes the presentation, the introduction of the BIPMIN experiment. You may now start with the first exercise. Keep in mind all that has been said during this video, and most importantly, keep track of these important notes, because they are details that you need to keep always at hand when you are performing this experiment, because if you don't remember to respect these notes, these suggestions, you will end up with some problems of any kind, and this may not be a pleasant experience. So keep in mind all that has been said, and be careful when doing the exercise. Good luck, and thank you again for your participation.